discussed the world's oldest profession. According to PSNI estimates, prostitution in Northern Ireland generates £25 million every year, making it, according to the police, one of the largest industries here. Demand for sexual services means that human traffickers... Well, we shouldn't be saying this, actually. Sorry, so I'll not be reading that. Carrie Mitchell is from the English Collective of Prostitutes. Morning to you, Carrie.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. And Dan Boucher, Director of Parliamentary Affairs at the Christian organisation Care. Morning to you, Dan.
Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning. Good morning to you. So obviously we've got a situation here in Northern Ireland in which there is concern about human trafficking. We had the DUP's Lord Morrow saying that he is so concerned about human trafficking that he wants to introduce this private members bill to essentially ban and criminalise men who will pay for sex, and that will be one component of trying to sort this out. Can I start with you, Carrie Mitchell? What do you think of that?
Well, we think it's a very bad idea that criminalising prostitute women's clients, when all the evidence shows that this just pushes prostitution more underground and makes it harder for sex workers to get protection, from violence and rape, really shows a total disregard. And this, for sex workers' lives. And criminalising clients won't stop prostitution. Prostitution is about women's poverty and lack of choices. There is a recession. Everybody knows that children are going hungry. Mothers are skipping meals in order to feed children. And criminalising clients, increasing criminalisation of any aspect of the sex industry always, always, always drives women further underground. And if clients on top are criminalised, then anybody who's being forced is losing one person who might have been ready to come forward to the police and say, look, I think this person may be in a bad situation. What client is going to do that if he's criminalised? So there is evidence from Sweden where clients have been criminalised, and there the stigma of prostitution has increased, not decreased, and women have been driven further underground, are having to take more risks in order to earn money, and violence has increased. So it's really the wrong direction. There's a similar thing that has happened in Scotland, and we are very concerned because this whole drive to criminalise clients is really being driven by those who are on a moral crusade against prostitution, who disapprove of prostitution.
Dan Boucher?
This is very much a social justice issue. You've got a choice. Do you want to frame the legislation that we have primarily out of regard for the eloquent, educated minority of women and men in prostitution who want to do it, and it's their choice? Or do you frame it out of primary regard for the vulnerable majority? I mean, the Home Office statistics are extremely clear. As many as 85% of people in prostitution report physical abuse at the family home, 45% reporting familial sexual abuse, many women controlled by their pimps through drug dependency. People who have been homeless, living in care, debt, substance misuse are much more likely to enter prostitution. Staggering 95% of women involved in street prostitution are addicted to Class A drugs. At least 65
no, I'm
women
sorry,
in prostitution.
That is a lie.
Well, no, these are Home Office.
These
are Home Office figures, and you can contest them, and the listeners will have to make their judgment. But I think that we shouldn't cast aside what the Home Office is saying quite as readily, perhaps, Carrie, as you would suggest. The point is this: but the majority of women and men in prostitution are a place of great vulnerability and exploitation. We've got to make a choice. Do you want to have a law that is framed primarily out of regard for the eloquent, educated minority, or out of regard for those who are in that position of vulnerability? And what Lord Morrow's bill does, it does many things, by the way. It's not just about criminalising paying for sex. It's a 16-clause bill.
That's true.
Which does many excellent things, as well as tackling the demand for paid sex. But his point is simply this, that the primary driver for trafficking into Northern Ireland is paid sex. So if his bill didn't do anything about tackling demand for paid sex, it wouldn't be really exactly fit for purpose.
Can I just say something? The primary driver for trafficking is inequity in the world. women are coming from countries, but women are moving all over the world, from countries where there is war and devastation, and women are getting up off their, out of their homes and saying, I'm going to go and find some money and do something about this to make sure that my family at home survives. That's what women are doing.
I don't think you'll find that's the experience of the people that have been put on the National Referral Mechanism. You look, 18 people were on the National Referral Mechanism for 2011-2012 in Northern Ireland who were trafficked for sexual exploitation purposes, and that is not their experience. That is not their story at all. And the point that you find is that when you actually introduce an offence, which is what the current offence is, an offence to buy sex from someone who's been coerced,
yes.
That offence is very difficult to enforce because you have to prove coercion. They've tried it in Finland.
Yes, and you must prove coercion. Otherwise, you are criminalising people
where you don't have that caveat. It's been very successful.
Well, hold on. I need to be able to hear you. What we were discussing on the TV show last night, and let's get your views on this at home, 08459 555 678, is that if you have a prostitute who has not been trafficked into the country, who is choosing to be a prostitute. Now, within that alone, some people would argue that no lady chooses to be a prostitute, that there will be circumstances forced upon her in which she has no choice. But if you have two consenting adults, one of whom wants to pay for sex, is it really right to criminalise that person? That man should be prosecuted and that man should get a criminal record? Maybe it is. 08459 555 678. Granier Taggert is from Amnesty International. Morning to you, Granier.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. And you saw the debate unfold on the TV last night. Lord Morrow was very much saying this is the way to go to tackle human trafficking. And we heard from other people last night saying leave consenting adults alone to get on with their own lives. And if one lady wants to charge and one man wants to pay for it, what's the problem?
Well, Amnesty's concern is on human trafficking. That's what we campaign on. But if we take the issue on one of the last points made on criminalisation, this doesn't just criminalise the man. It doesn't shift the focus away from the woman to the man, as the woman would also be guilty of aiding and abetting and or conspiring with the man purchasing the sex. So this targets the woman as well, and that is the case.
That's not the case in Sweden.
On the bill being based on the Swedish model, this is not a clear-cut debate. There's conflicting evidence as to whether or not that Swedish model has worked. And what we have to remember is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to human trafficking. Now, our view is that prostitution and human trafficking need to be kept as two separate issues, and that it's unhelpful to conflate the two. The risk with this proposed legislation is that it could potentially, and in very real terms, divert criminal justice resources, including the PSNI, away from actually tackling the trafficking and into police and prostitution, which would be counterproductive to its stated objectives. So if the PSNI are police and prostitution, who goes after the traffickers? And we have to remember as well that human trafficking is not just about sexual exploitation. There's forced labour, domestic servitude, and other forms of slavery too. So what we have to remember is that this isn't a static issue. Human trafficking is going to evolve and change over time, so we need to be very careful about what we commit to the statute books. What we need in Northern Ireland is a system that is sufficiently flexible that it will respond to the problem as it changes and evolves.
Go on, Dan.
Just to respond to that, I think it's really important to be clear that Lord Morrow's bill has got 16 clauses in it, and it actually will result in more resources being devoted to tackling human trafficking. And with specific respect to Clause 4, that again is true because the current offence of prosecuting someone who buys sex from someone who's coerced is incredibly resource intense because it takes a lot of resources to prove that someone has been coerced. What the evidence from Sweden is that where you don't have a caveated offence, it's much easier, and having spoken to police officers, they will tell you that it'll be much easier for them to secure prosecutions with a non-caveated offence. And to send that very clear signal that actually the commodification of bodies, the buying of someone, is not acceptable. And
that is ridiculous. People buy and sell their services every day of the week. You would not say that just because women, mainly women, who are in domestic service, who are being forced in domestic service situations, and who are, in fact, in many cases, much worse conditions than women who are forced into the sex industry. It would be ridiculous to say that you should criminalise the employers of those who want to have their homes cleaned. I mean, this is what you're talking about.
It's a completely different thing. It's the commodification of the human body, and that's a totally different thing.
Are you sure, Dan?
Sorry, can I just say this? Those who are backing this viewpoint should be very careful. In the south of Ireland, there's an organisation called Ruhama who has the Sisters of Mercy on their board, and these are the very same sisters who ran Magdalene Laundries. These are the people who are pressing. These are the people who are lining up to press for criminalisation of clients. They do not have any legitimacy to pronounce on the care of women and children.
Well, the Magdalene Laundries was a long, long time ago. Are you sure, Dan?
Excuse me, it has just come out now and people know what is going on. And these are the people who are taking a moral viewpoint against women and men who are having consenting sex.
Dan, are you sure? Your organisation is a Christian campaigning organisation. This is about religious objections to prostitution, isn't it?
It really isn't. It's about social
It's not.
justice. As I said,
so you don't have a religious objection to prostitution?
What's driving us here is the belief that everyone is made equal. And as I said, I went through the statistics about the vulnerability of women, the fact that most people who go into prostitution are homeless.
But you see...
Can I just raise a point just on the point of statistics?
Of course, Granier Taggert. OK, Granier, hold on, Granier.
Just on the point of statistics, again with the problem of human trafficking, there's a limit to how useful it is to look at numbers. This is a hidden crime, so it's much more useful for us to look at trends rather than the specific figures, because there are gaps in how we collate the data and information that gives us the Northern Ireland picture to this problem. One of the asks that Amnesty would have, and something that would be very practical for our Department of Justice to do, is to publish specific data on Northern Ireland, on victims here, so we can see a full breakdown of what this problem looks like in Northern Ireland. Then, and only then, would we have policies and programmes, anti-trafficking initiatives, that would be fully informed by that full picture. So we don't have that at the minute, and that's very important to note.
Well, this is, as I say, it's Home Office data, and it's important to remember that Lord Morrows' bill is the Human Trafficking and Exploitation Bill. It's not just the Human Trafficking Bill. And it's premised on the fact that the data shows that for prostitution generally, the majority of people involved with it are being exploited and are vulnerable.
No, I'm sorry, that is not that Home Office.
And I realise that Carrie is always going to disagree.
Hold on, Carrie. Let's let him finish first.
But this is Home Office data. And just to come back to your point about this being a moralising sort of crusade of Christians, it's important to realise that actually the person who's pressing has a private member's bill in Scotland isn't from the DUP, they're from the Labour Party. That there's a review now in Westminster, which is chaired by a Labour MP, reviewing the law, looking at the introducing of criminalising paying for sex. And also, at the Council of Europe, there's a Social Democrat parliamentarian who is starting a review.
Let's also remember as well, that in Northern Ireland we have our own unique set of circumstances. We have a porous border, and trafficking knows no borders. So at the minute, again, another gap is that we haven't had a proper impact assessment of that border on the experience of victims here on this island. That's still missing, so that's still a gap that we need to address.
We've got to leave it there, but Dan and Granier and Carrie, thank you very much indeed. 10:25. I see some other news just coming into us here. It is that HMV, their administrators, HMV, the huge music store obviously, they're to close 66 of their shops